Hey everyone, Gary Simon of Coursetro.com, and today we're going to take a look at the basics of Angular 2 templating and also how to integrate various CSS frameworks such as Foundation and Bootstrap. All right, so let's switch over to our command prompt. Make sure you're in your projects folder. And by the way, if you haven't seen my video previous to this, where I show you how to create a new Angular 2 project through the Angular client, you might want to check that out first just to make sure you have everything needed installed. So I'm going to type in ng new, we'll call this templates. And before I hit enter, we're going to take a look at something I haven't covered yet. So let's go over to the browser and we'll go to the GitHub Angular client page. And I'm going to hit Control F to type in and find processors, not processors. And right here we have CSS preprocessor integration. So it supports Sass and SCSS, less and stylus. And so if we come down here, we'll see we have ng new, your project name, and the option to specify a preprocessor such as -- style equals Sass. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to put -- style equals SCSS and then hit enter. So now, because this takes a little bit of time, I'm just going to go ahead and pause it and then I'll come right back. All right, it's done now. Let's go ahead and switch back. I'm going to hit cd and templates and then ng serve. Now, this is going to go ahead and compile. And I'll go ahead over to the browser and specify localhost 4200. Just make sure everything is good to go, and it is. Put a new tab up and app works. We're all good to go. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead over to my code editor. I'm going to open up that folder, templates, and select folder. All right, and here we are. The first thing I want to do is look at the source folder. And in here, you'll notice we have styles.scss. And usually when you create an Angular 2 project from the client like that, by default, without specifying a preprocessor, it will be styles.css. But now we can write Sass in here and it will compile down. Okay, so let's go ahead inside our app folder and go to app.component.ts rather. And the areas that we want to focus on are the templates and styles. Now, by default, when you create an Angular 2 project through the client, it uses the template URL to link to an external HTML file where your template or your view would go. Same thing with your style URLs as well. And this is specific to the tags and the codes and the IDs and classes that you add in this HTML file here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and comment these out real quick to show you how we can do inline CSS and HTML. So actually what we'll do is just take this one down, add it right here. So the property changes from template URL to simply template. And then in single quotes, if we have a single line of HTML, we can specify something like P, hi, what is up, and close it, and then save it. And we'll come over here. Hi, what is up? Very, very simple. Now, if you want to add multiple lines of HTML, you have to change these single quotes here to backticks, which is accessible to the key to the left of the number 1 at the top of your keyboard. So we'll change that there. And now, and I'll add another element, maybe a UL item number 1. And we could save this, and we'll see this should now reflect the HTML that we just specified. Now, what about CSS? Basically, it's the same concept. So the property name for that, let's put a comma here after that backtick, is styles. And we wrap it around brackets and single quotes here. And then we can specify some CSS that references the HTML that we have above here. So we'll put in P, font -weight bold, and then maybe ULLI, and we'll specify, oops, we need to close this over here with a curly bracket or brace and specify something like text-decoration underline. I just want to do something so we know that it works. So we'll save this. And there we go. All right, so inline HTML in CSS, when exactly would you want to utilize that as opposed to just linking to a separate HTML and CSS file? Well, if you ever run into a situation where your component has very little HTML and CSS, that's when it makes sense to use the inline option. Otherwise, if you have a lot of HTML and CSS and you don't want it cluttering your component view, then you can go ahead and place that into a different HTML file and use the template URL option as well as the style URLs option as well. And whenever you can get away with adding it into your component decorator inline, you should do that because it is actually a bit faster because it does reduce the time needed because it's right in the file as opposed to making a request from another file to grab the HTML or CSS. All right, so let's go ahead and get rid of all of this and we'll bring back our template URL right there. Let's save it just to make sure everything is back to where it was with AppWorks. Okay, so now let's say, for example, you want to integrate a CSS framework such as Bootstrap or Foundation because you're used to using the grid or some of the other predefined elements for the CSS. Well, there's a couple ways you can do that. There's a quick method and then there's a method that you can utilize that takes a little bit more time, but it does host it on your project and on your server as opposed to linking to a CDN. So let's look at the first option, which is the CDN option. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at, and we're going to specify getbootstrap.com and we're going to click on download Bootstrap and we'll see we have the Bootstrap CDN. So we want the one that's latest compiled and minified CSS. So we'll grab this HTML here and copy it. We'll go back to our project and in index.html, we're going to specify or paste rather what we just copied. So we're going to save this. And if we go back to our project here, you can see that it now updated from that serif font, which is default without CSS, to this sans serif font, which means that Bootstrap is now loaded. Okay, so that's the very quick method of integrating the Bootstrap CDN. And the same thing applies to Foundation. All you have to do is Google Foundation, or not NPM, but rather Foundation CDN, and you'll find one that's hosted, and you can do the same exact thing, and you'll have access to coding with Foundation. Okay, so let's go ahead and undo that. I'm gonna save that just to get rid of that. And when you'll notice we go back here, it will change back to our serif font. And let's say, for example, you wanted to include Bootstrap as a part of your project. So the way you'd wanna do this is first, let's go back to our browser here and click right here. Not sure if you can hear that, that's my phone that's ringing on silent next to me. Hopefully you can't. And we want to hit Control F here on this GitHub Angular client page and just type in Bootstrap. Now we'll see we have a global library installation section. So for Bootstrap, to install it, we do it from npm. So npm install bootstrap at next. So let's go back here to our command prompt, Control C to get out of ng-serve. I'm going to type in npm install bootstrap at next. So I'm going to go ahead and just pause this because it can take just a tad bit of time, and I'll come back. All right, so it is done. Now it's added it into our node modules folder. So let's go back to our project, and we don't have to include anything here. However, we have to write down here in angular-cli.json. And so what we have to specify something in our styles and also our scripts. So if we go back to that page that we were just at, you can see it tells you what needs loaded here inside of the scripts tag. So let's go ahead and copy that. We'll paste that inside of scripts. We'll save it. And then we'll also go back here, and there's one more that we need to add. And that's just on top of the existing styles.html In our case, it's going to be SCSS. We add this right here. So let's go back. And then we save it. Now ngserve doesn't watch this file, so we have to go ahead real quickly. Oh, I was already out of it. So ngserve. We'll wait just a couple seconds. Let's go over here to our browser and we'll see it should update here. There we go with AppWorks, and now it is integrated. Control-Shift-I, everything is working. So there's a similar process for Foundation. So I'm not going to cover doing the Foundation CDN. I already told you how to do that. Very, very simple. However, let's also take a look at what it takes to integrate Foundation into the project itself, as we just did with Bootstrap. So real quickly, I'm going to go ahead over to our project, and I'm going to back up a couple times back to where we were before and save it. And then we're going to go back to our command line. I'm going to Control-C to get out of here. And I'm going to type in npm install foundation-sites --save. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and just pause this while it goes through and installs. All right, and it's installed. So let's go back to our project. And for Foundation to work, we don't have a page or anywhere on the existing Angular client page that'll let us know how that works. So we have to add it manually. And basically, if you look up in the node modules folder, you'll find the foundation-sites folder that we just had installed. And you'll have to find which of the CSS versions you want to use, such as the Flex Grid or the regular grid, etc. So just to show you, I know what it is offhand. So in our styles, we'll want to specify, I'm looking off the side because I already have the link saved over here. Right here, the link happens to be node modules, foundation-sites, dist, and then foundation-flex. I like using the Flex Grid. And then also here for scripts, we add in a reference to two scripts, which is jQuery, and then also foundation-sites dist and foundation.min.js. So let's go ahead and save that. Come back here, ngserve. I'm going to come back here. See if it's loaded or it's finished loading yet over here. And there we go. You can see the font change slightly. And just to make sure it's consistent with Foundation and it's integrated, we can go ahead over to our app component.html and specify some specific Foundation HTML. So div class equals row. Oh, come on, Gary, what are you doing? There we go. And then inside of here, we can put all right, and row is a specific class to Foundation, and we'll know it works because it won't be smashed right up against the side of the browser. If we Control-Shift-I real quick, you see everything is integrated. And if we click on this real quick, oops, I think I clicked on that. Let me bring this down. Actually, if we just click on this and row, we'll see we have row. The CSS is loading from the Foundation that we just installed. All right, so that is it for this lesson specifically. So hopefully you learned a lot about just basic templating, and trust me, there's a lot more, such as interpolation and pipes and all that. And we're gonna get to all of that very shortly. So look out for the next video in this series, and I'll see you then. Make sure to subscribe here on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're watching this somewhere else, such as Coursetro.com, check out the YouTube channel and subscribe there. All right, I'll see you guys soon.